Hey, this is Nick Pollock from My Sister's Machine, and you're listening to Nothing Shocking Podcast.
Want to know what's going on in the world of music? Then tune in to the Nothing Shocking Podcast, a non-genre based, all-ages friendly rock and roll program. Join us weekly for interviews with all your favorite rock stars from the mainstream to the underground. You can find us at nothingshocking.libsyn.com or anywhere you download podcasts.
Welcome to the night. You think you know Night Demon? Then the Night Demon Heavy Metal Podcast is for you. Step into the darkness as we peel back the curtain to give you an unprecedented, all-access look into the mind and the heart of the demon. We're talking band history, song analysis, studio anecdotes, stories from the road. It's everything a diehard Night Demon fan could want and more. This is the only place to learn the inside scoop, the deep dive trivia, the untold tales from the band members themselves and those closest to the Night Demon story. Need more? The sacred Night Demon Crypt will be pried open to reveal demo recordings that have never before seen the light of day, all with in-depth commentary by the band and the people who were there for the writing and recording process. This is a gold mine, a treasure trove of all things Night Demon. Head over to nightdemon.net or wherever you listen to podcasts.
We're putting the band back together.
The numbers all go to 11.
I'm talking about bands that rock. Led Zeppelin. What about Sabbath? AC/DC. Motorhead.
Does that mean it's louder? Is it any louder?
Well, it's one louder, isn't it?
We're not worthy. We're not worthy.
Why don't you just make 10 louder and make 10 be the top number and make that a little louder?
These go to 11.
I get up off the ground and raise my head. Days like this, think I should be dead. One for Satan, two for me. Let's cheat the devil, it's fun, don't you agree?
Welcome to the Nothing Shocking Podcast. I'm your co-host, Jeff Untied, and with me in Dog Bowl Studios is
Coach Nez.
You can find the Nothing Shocking Podcast on Libsyn or any podcatchers. Like our Facebook page or follow us on Twitter at NoShockPod.
You can also find the Nothing Shocking Podcast on Rock Rage Radio every Tuesday night at 10 p.m. Central Time. Our sponsor is Ragged Records, located in downtown Rock Island, Illinois, soon to be coming back to downtown Davenport, Iowa in July. We would like to thank the Hong Kong Sleepover for allowing us to use their music for our intro and bumper ending. Tonight's guest is
Nick Pollock of My Sister's Machine.
Tanks of Zen.
Soulbender.
And the National Guard.
Yeah.
Lead singer.
Flew under the radar a little bit with My Sister's Machine back in the grunge days. But, man, if you listen to that, it's very early, Alice in Chains. And,
heavy.
Yeah.
Very heavy. Kind of came out of the grunge movement, but I really wouldn't consider him a grunge band. If you like heavy music, you'll love Nick's vocals. Let's get to this interview.
All right. Good night.
Good night.
Let's do it.
All right. Hey, Nick, welcome to the Nothing Shocking Podcast. I'd like to introduce to you my co-host, Jeff Untied.
Nick, this is great to talk to you tonight.
Hey, guys. How's it going? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, we are so excited to have you tonight. So, like I said, we were big fans of My Sister's Machine, so we said, we got to find this guy. We got to find this guy and have him on the podcast. So, excited.
And you found me under a rock.
We did. Yeah. So, let's get right into this. As we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel with COVID-19, restrictions kind of easing up here. How have you been creative on the music end of things?
Let's see. I think for the most part, of course, since I've been living in a cave like everybody else has, my musical world has just been me at home, working from home, and, with guitars all around me, that kind of thing. Yeah. That's the long and short of it. I do also think that it feels like this last year's been like a blink of an eye. Somebody made a joke online about, it was March and then some stuff happened. Then it was March, and now it's 2021.
Spot on, man.
Yeah.
Spot on. So, before we get into your life and rock and roll, we wanted to talk a little bit about your day job. You are a designer of digital products. Can you talk more about your career path in technology?
Yeah, sure. So I am, my title that you'd find on LinkedIn is UX designer, which means user experience. And I've designed anything from like a smart thermostat. I'm on a patent. That was a weird thing to have actually happen with a group of people that we did for a company called Johnson Controls. They invented the thermostat, to doing like 3D software for training maintenance people for Boeing, various airframes and stuff, and then websites and apps and all this kind of stuff. So that's my day job. It started out being a graphic designer. Figured that would be a cool way to go when I decided to move away from music as a source of income and that kind of thing. And I got lucky in the digital world. I went right into it when it existed with the internet and things like that in the 90s. And my career just grew, and it buys me lots of recording gear. I have a recording studio downstairs, lots of guitars, and all that kind of stuff. So I'm pretty much in heaven.
Oh, so cool.
Yeah.
Jeff, you got this next one?
What's your favorite guitar to play today?
Well, let's see here. I owned all kinds of, vintage, like Fender and Les Paul, many, many, many other things in that type of a realm, and they just never worked for me. So I went for a builder. These guys out of Georgia called Warrior Instruments. They hand build guitars. Their closest neighbor is going to be kind of like a PRS, but these I think are better. The heel on the neck are unbelievable. It's so smooth you don't even notice it's there. It's got a volute up at the top of the neck, which is basically like a reinforcement piece that sticks out where the headstock bends back. So I love that. I just know where I'm at on the neck since I sing and play. I don't have to look at it really that much, but they're just brilliant guitars. They've got amazing wood. They're handmade. They're amazing. I've owned 5, and I still currently own 3 of them.
Oh, cool.
What gauge of string do you use?
I go with 11s on top down to either a 52 or a 56 on the bottom. Just depends on my mood, I think, pretty much.
Oh, it's so interesting that you say that, because I think it was this past summer I was mowing grass. I used to listen to Jonesy's Jukebox podcast all the time, Steve Jones, Sex Pistols, and he had Billy Gibbons on, and they were asking about gauge of guitar strings. He uses 7s. And he said
these are so light.
Yeah, he was saying that, and he said, well, I used to use a higher gauge. I used to use like a 10 or 11. And then he was backstage with B.B. King, and B.B. King took one of his guitars one time and was noodling around on this guitar. And he says, man, why do you work so hard? Why do you work so hard with your fingertips? And he, ever since then, he switched gauges and he went all the way down to a 7. So I thought, wow, that's a kind of interesting question to ask artists, especially guitars extraordinaires like yourself. So,
well, there's another point to that too. That guy, Rick Beato, who does a music podcast, is pretty popular. He's like a producer, guitar player, amazing guitar player, and he's really into like heavy music. He did a test on them, and like a frequency response, the thicker strings are darker. And whereas you get to the lighter ones, they become more mid-range and have a heavier feel to them. So, I mean, he went about it the same way you just talked about, like with Billy Gibbons.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get back to you. That's what's most important here.
Okay. I can geek out about gear all the time.
In 2015, you formed the band National Guard. As to date, the band has released 2 singles, I believe, correct?
2 singles, and we released an album, actually, the week before the entire world shut down for COVID.
I gotcha. Well,
really sucks.
Can you talk about a little bit more about the formation of the band, the 2 singles that released, and the album, kind of all in one?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. It was me and a guitar player friend of mine named Chris Quinn. He used to play in Truly, among others. He's played in a lot of bands. SGM, which was a precursor to Sweetwater out of Seattle and that kind of thing. And basically we started playing together, and then we pulled together Aaron Tate, who was the drummer for Minus the Bear, pretty popular indie band this last decade.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got a kind of a closeted hard rock bent to him, which is really cool because he's an amazing drummer. And Nick Reinhardt plays bass, who folks around here will definitely know him because he played in a band called Bam Bam, which was part of the scene back in the day. And he also is the bass player that played on Jerry Cantrell's Boggy Depot.
Mm-hmm.
And the tour that they did, he toured with them. I think they were opening for Metallica. But he's a really good friend and an amazing bass player. We switched guitar players. Chris left, and my lifelong friend Jimmy Chow joined the band. And he came in and redid all of Chris's guitar parts, and it became the album that we hear today. So the first two singles that you talked about have Chris Quinn on them.
Oh, okay.
And the album itself has those songs in there, but we did some reimagining and remixing and added tracks on there. Not really added, we swapped them out. And that's what you find mixed on that one.
Oh, so cool.
Yeah.
As far as future endeavors go for the band, what does National Guard have in store for us?
That's a good question. The most tangible part of that, because like everybody else is like, everybody's almost completely vaccinated, which means that for coming up, Jimmy, the guitar player, and I are going to get together and start working on material. Let me see here. He's going to come over to my studio and we're going to work on things, and we're approaching it really differently than we've done before. I think I mentioned to you before about sort of that was actually Dave I was talking to. We were talking about basically, it was a heavier band, but some of the material started going in a little bit more, or less distorted guitars that still had the dynamic that all the rest of the material we've done. And we're exploring doing things that are going to be, we want to come up with a sound that's completely different. So the sky's the limit, and we're very open-minded on that. We don't know what the hell's going to happen, but I've already got a lot of good stuff written. I write conceptually. So I have kind of a narrative that I wanted to go off of as well, and that kind of thing. So yeah, that's kind of next. And at some point we're going to actually have to go find a practice room again.
Oh, so cool. We're excited.
Yeah.
All right, Jeff, you got the next one?
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about the song This World. I think it's towards the end of the album, Death Blossom. Can you talk a little bit about the creation of that song?
Yeah, I suppose that one is a song that I wrote a while ago, a number of years ago. And I guess it becomes more relevant to what things are going on today. And it's just this idea that we all should be unified on the fact that there are real problems we have in the world. And not to get preachy, but I can't help but notice this kind of stuff going on. The song talks about it. It's like, all we can do is give, is the refrain at the end of the chorus and stuff. And it's just really talking about that idea that, good Lord, we've got a common factor as human beings, and we fight about the stupidest bullshit that just blows my mind. I don't care what side of the aisle people are on politically. I really don't even like talking about that or trying to stipulate where my thoughts or proclivities lie. I will say this, that they don't fit in any one or the other. And I think that it's much more interesting to be able to have conversations with people. That whole record has a lot to do with that fact. Can we actually address our common human situation instead of talking about this other bullshit?
Yeah. Well said.
Nice.
Well said. I kind of take this a little bit of a different direction, more of a generalized question for you that, this day and age of record sales not being what they were, but we see more artists now releasing singles digitally opposed to releasing full albums even digitally, or even the actual tangible product of an album or a CD in our hand or whatever. But what are your thought processes of releasing song at a time opposed to releasing full-length album or maybe even an EP? How does it work for you?
I'm an album-oriented guy, and I like to make the things that I want to talk about and the way that I like to talk about them creatively usually requires more than that. I'm not saying that there's not a place for singles or just releasing singles and approaching it that way. I would not want. I think it's problematic when what people are doing. If you listen to any charts, for example, like go on Spotify and look at what all the charts are of the most popular stuff out there, and you've got people that are writing nursery rhymes, basically. I mean, they're the most basic 1-4-5-1 chord progressions, and they're the same ones other people are using in even exactly the same key, and they're so it's like that movie Idiocracy, that music has become really remedial and dumb. And it's sad to hear that when you could listen to things even 10 years ago or 20 years ago, or, from the 70s, from the 80s, and you've got, diverse points of view in music that are out there that is lost. I don't think the issue is because people are doing singles. I think the vehicle of singles is because people are trying to write things that keep people with zero attention span occupied for 3 minutes long, and it's all cotton candy. It's got absolutely no nutritional value.
Well said.
Yeah.
Jeff, you got the next one? You want me to take the next one? Let's kind of shift this to Tanks of Zen. Was a band that was formed back in, I believe, 2000. Can you talk more about the formation of Tanks of Zen, and why did that band fly under the radar?
Yeah.
Well, let's see here. I would say that it is the product of what I was initially planning for a third album for My Sister's Machine. And I actually recorded one version of that, did not like what the outcome of it was, and I just never released that record. And some people have not liked that idea, and they just want to hear it anyways, and it's like, no. I mean, one song came out of that, a song called Through the Red Light, which is on YouTube and stuff like that, came out. But the Tank stuff started out as, like I said, a third album for My Sister's Machine, and only maybe a few of those songs actually showed up on a record. But as I started writing for things and I started growing away from what I did with My Sister's Machine and trying to say, like, what I want to do now, I did what I did with that. And actually, because of the vicissitudes of other musicians' lives, I just did it as a three-piece. So I played all the guitars and vocals whenever we played live. And then a bass player and drummer friend of mine worked on that one. And I played, 75% of the instruments for recording. I recorded everything but the drums and that kind of thing. And it just grew out of that. It was meant to be, I guess at the time, a little bit more of a 70s feel. Or at least to me, it seemed like that had some other flavors in there. But that was the long and the short of it. And the thing is it had starts and stops, because right around the time of 2001, I ended up meeting Michael Wilton from Queensryche, and he and I formed a band called Soulbender with some friends of ours up in Vancouver. And then I worked on an album for that was released in 2004. And then I picked back up and actually ended up recording and releasing Love's Gentle Maw, which is the Tanks record that is out. The first one that I didn't put out was actually in 1999.
Oh, okay.
So with that being said, as we're kind of sticking with Tanks here, will we ever see another Tanks of Zen album come back to fruition again, or is that a project that's in the past and it's going to stay that way?
No, I think something else will happen with it. I mean, I've got a lot of songs that I haven't put out that aren't good for, say, the National Guard, or they weren't good for like they may be too heavy for some bands, and other ones they're too light, like say for Soulbender. But to me, the name and everything is. I love the guys that I played with and their friends and stuff like that, but I know they've got their own things going, and I can do all of this stuff on my own, and in some cases I really like that. And others, it's like I really like working with others, and I never felt that it felt a little bit awkward to go out the door with Nick Pollock as a name for the music. I almost like working on something with it, like an imprint instead.
Oh, so cool.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Just from the business side of things, how, do you take on that role yourself, or do you have a team that helps you?
Oh yeah, I just do all of it myself. The only shortcoming that I've got going on right now is that I don't have the means to market and promote something, and I would love to find a record label that would be willing to do a deal where they didn't touch my licensing and went that way with it. But that being said, I'm happy to have relegated myself to not reaching a lot of people. I mean, My Sister's Machine sold a collective 140,000 records. We also had some major muscle behind us in terms of record labels and things like that. And this isn't about money at all for me. I just like to write songs. I like to make records, and I like to do them the way that I want them done. And I get more and more involved with recording. I'm going to be going in and taking the dive and doing mixing for myself next, for good or for bad, because partially I want to learn it, and partially because it's no slight on anybody that I've worked with. It's hard to get out what I have in my head without being able to go do things the wrong way. So I can figure out what works right for me.
You had briefly discussed Soulbender. That Soulbender album was released, I believe, in 2001, or was that right? Is that 2001?
I think it came out in 2004.
2004.
Yeah, we re-released it in 2014 with 4 additional songs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You'd kind of discussed here so briefly meeting Michael Wilton of Queensryche. Can you talk a little bit more of the creation of Soulbender, meeting Michael Wilton, and how it all went together?
Yeah, well, so he had already been doing stuff with Dave Groves and Wes Hallam, that's other guitar and drummer, respectively, who live up in Coquitlam, which is just right outside of Vancouver in BC, up in Canada, just above us. And so I met Michael, and their way of trying me out was to give me a song and asking me to write to it. And it happened to be in 6/4 time. And the fact that I could actually write to a compound meter, basically, was greatly to their liking. And that I could come up with something cool and hooky in a metal type of way that worked with that. And so basically I spent a lot of time over at Michael's house in Redmond, and we would work on songs. And he's the one that really turned me on to this new wonderful world of digital recording, which was basically in its infancy back then. And I, totally took to that and had stuff to where I could record at home. Then we would do things at his place in his studio. I thankfully got to play with all of his guitars and all that kind of stuff, which was loads of fun. And then basically, we started like Dave and Wes would come down and we would jam in Michael's studio, or we would go rent a place. And that just started this huge friendship, I think even more so between me and Dave Groves. And he and I have worked on and written things aside from this. And a lot of those songs, he and I spent a lot of time. We're both of a more classical compositional background and have a really good sense for song arranging, writing, and all that kind of stuff. And we both think in very complementary ways. So a lot of that stuff that you find on there is a lot of mine and Dave's ideas or input. Few of the songs are just ones that I brought in, and others are ones that Michael and I worked on. And Michael, in his own right, is an amazing guy to work with. I'm such a massive Queensryche fan from around Rage for Order and Operation Mindcrime that is just not even funny. The old stuff too, but especially those two records were big. I remember going to practice in the original Alice in Chains. Lane Staley was my best friend for quite a bit of time, from like 17 on up, until we all ended up out on the road in our respective bands. And of course he became wildly famous. And anyways, that was Operation Mindcrime and Rage for Order. He and I used to listen to that as we're driving to practice over in Ballard every day. So, I mean, that was just a huge part of my life.
Oh, so cool.
Yeah.
Jeff, you got the next one?
Yeah, I was going to ask you about, I used to live in the Seattle, Washington area.
Seattle is a lovely place.
Well, I was just curious if what the scene is like there now. I mean, I know it's drastically changed, but are there still live venues that are pre-COVID, I guess, that supporting?
Right. Well, I would say, to be objective about that, Seattle is a creative hotbed for all kinds of mediums, I guess you could say, and always has been. And I think that DNA is still here. Back around 1990-ish or 91 or so, when everything really happened. Prior to that, it was much, much smaller. You'd find like 400 people that were all going to each other's bands' shows in various clubs around town. And then the clubs started to grow, and as things blew up, everybody and their brother moved here. And there was a lot of weeds that you had to sort through to get to actually flowers in the garden, if you will.
Yeah.
And I'm not, slagging on anybody else. Everybody's going to come to a place where they think that they're going to get a break and do all that. But it started to be over at that time. And then it was over, I think, by the time we got to, 94, 95.
Yeah.
And, but Seattle as a creative place, like I went to college at a place called Cornish College of the Arts, private art school, college. And the first time I went there, I went as a classical guitarist and a classical composer. I went back 10 years later, and I went for design. I've got lots of friends in the artistic community, as it were. And I just think that people that are, really born of this place, whether they grew up here or not, have that to them, and they sort of march to their own drum, and that's really a great thing. And there's also going to be, it's become more cosmopolitan in that we've got places like Amazon and all the other, it's a tech hub, and a lot of that brings a lot of tech bros and people like that have taken over places like Capitol Hill. That is really, really tragic. I mean, that was my most formative years, hanging out there in the U District and going to parties with all the punks and the punk rockers and all the rockers and all that kind of stuff, and where they hung out. And it's like, it's changed. Nothing ever stays the same, but it's still got good bones, good DNA here.
Oh, fantastic. Good. All right. So we're going to discuss our favorite subject. It was My Sister's Machine. Yeah. Obviously, it's a band spawned from the Seattle grunge movement. Although the band was much more to me than a grunge act. Do you feel frustrated by being lumped in as a grunge act opposed to being just a heavier rock band? How does it work for you? Your thought process?
Well, yeah, I think that that was and always will be a big frustration. That, like, I don't like the word grunge. It's silly that name got attached to it. I mean, because what you have are punk bands that mixed up a lot of their interests and flavors in a special way, and it produced Soundgarden. It produced Nirvana. Then you've got hybrids of that type of a thing, and it produced Green River, and that split off, and you got things like Mudhoney, and you got Mother Love Bone, and what ends up being Pearl Jam. But I don't understand what grunge is. It's just rock and roll. And like the other side of that equation, by the way, was there were a lot from the rock side that was the Alice in Chains, the My Sister's Machine, and all kinds of bands from that side of it too, that still came with a lot of the same flavors. I mean, from the scene and community of music. I mean, we would go to a place called the Oxford or the Vogue, or you'd start at one and you go to the next, especially on a Thursday night. And the guys from Mother Love Bone would hang out at the Oxford, and we'd all go over there too, so we could pick up girls. And then we would go to the Vogue because it was ladies' night on Thursdays, and pick up girls and drink and get shit faced and all that kind of stuff. But then people also played at these places, not the Oxford, but at the Vogue, and a number of, all kinds of other places. The Central, the Vogue and the Central were really big ones back then. And basically, I don't know. I think that a lot of my friends grew up listening to Van Halen, UFO, anything Michael Schenker did, and that had more to do with the music we wrote than whatever the hell it is that people are talking about for us. And I think that My Sister's Machine was one of the heaviest bands out of that whole group of things that wasn't just a flat out metal band,
Absolutely.
And yeah, and I do think that Michael Schenker had a lot to do with that for us. That was a commonality for me and Owen.
Well, the interesting thing about that whole era of music, in that coming from Seattle, was, well, for instance, for me, the first time I heard anything from that area, I was walking into my local record store, and they had a promotional copy of Louder Than Love by Soundgarden. Yeah. And I walked into the intro to The Ugly Truth, and wow, what is this? This is something totally different than what they're playing on MTV and anything you're getting on FM radio, because we're here in the Midwest, we're not getting what's out there on the West Coast.
A little behind.
Yeah, quite behind. But it was significantly different for the moment of the time. Would you agree or not?
Oh, absolutely. We got a crash course in what you're talking about right now, coming from the Midwest, in the form of going out on tour, at the very beginning of the 90s. And I remember talking to people, like these guys would come up in the Midwest, which seemed to be, no offense, but were probably more farther behind in what was going on than the coast. And that's natural. It's just the way it usually happens. But they knew something was going on. They were trying to figure it out. And they come out with their kind of, silk shirts and all that kind of stuff. And they want to talk about, like, well, we really dig, Yngwie Malmsteen but Kurt Cobain is a shitty guitar player. And it's like, that's one way to look at it. That is one way to look at it. But what he's expressing emotionally is really what that's all about. And somehow they still got it because they knew it rocked, and they would listen to what we were doing and go, is that important to you? And it's like, yeah, I mean, I like Yngwie Malmsteen as well. I don't want to play like him. I couldn't if I tried. I just don't have that ability. Mm-hmm. And Lord knows that when I was much younger, I wanted to. But, it is one of those things that I think this is the most wonderful thing about writing songs. And if you have the balls to get outside of yourself and say, I'm going to do something I've never done before. And by the way, that isn't being done at all. There's a massive weight of a tsunami weighing down on you to sound like all the stuff that's out there floating in the ether that you hear. Mm. And, it's one thing to close yourself off from it. I don't like that. I like to listen to stuff and be real critical and go, I want to take that part out of this, and how can I do that and make it part of some of the things that I do? And if what you're talking about, like with The Ugly Truth, I can imagine hearing that for the first time. I remember what it was like for me. That is like a life-changing moment. It lights you up because it's so new. I had the good fortune to the manager for My Sister's Machine early on. Her name was Susie Bridges, and she's passed away a handful of years ago. And Susie, I was over at her house. I dealt with the business part of things a whole lot, and for a whole bunch of that time, Chris Cornell and Susan Silver, his then wife, lived at Susie's place. So this was all around the time where Andrew Wood died of an overdose. And I got to hear a lot of these things before they were actually out on a record, which is really cool. Like the Temple of Dogs stuff. I heard the 2 songs that he wrote for that on a 4-track before it came out.
Oh, wow.
And that was a trip to go out and just like smoke cigarettes with him and talk and to talk about gear and like, we both liked Mesa Boogie amp heads and just stupid shit like that. But I heard those 2 songs and it was like it just was so revolutionary to go like, I've got such mad respect for him as a songwriter that it was so amazing to be able to have that kind of experience. But then also to go and see it for the first time live when they played at the Moore Theater for that record, and to watch that stuff just like, it was like the newest dinosaur rock taking over an entire theater. It was unbelievable.
Fantastic.
Oh, yeah. Very cool. So I read it with my Sister's Machine that nobody could had any experience with singing. So you got the gig by default. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was a funny one. I was both naive and had brass balls because I was writing the words, and honestly, there was a point where I was going to have. I asked Lane to like, would you just sing on a demo tape so we can get a singer? And I got the stuff all worked out and stuff. And then they were going down to LA right about then to do demos for Columbia before they got signed. And, they were practicing with us in the same room for quite a bit of time. And he was too busy. And then I remember being down in that room and I'm like, well, fuck it, I'll try it. And so I did, and we did it in practices, and then we went to the Music Source, which was a recording studio up on Capitol Hill, and we recorded some demos there, and I sang on them. That was my first, like, oh, shit, this is a whole different thing. And then we played our first show opening for Alice in Chains at the Central, and I had the dry heaves, and the only reason I wasn't throwing up anything real is because I couldn't eat all day. And I sang live. It took me probably, 6 to 12 or more months to get used to it. One of the biggest blessings and a curse was that somebody in a show out in Tacoma stole my amp head, and I couldn't afford to buy one for a while, so I just sang. So it's just me and a mic stand, and so I got a lot more familiar with it, and I got drunk enough before I did it that I was like, fuck it, who cares?
That's
awesome. Fantastic.
Yeah.
All right, so I got 2 more questions for you, then we're going to let you go for the night, okay?
Okay, sure.
We won't bother you anymore.
No, you're not bothering me.
Let's talk about your involvement in the early years with Alice in Chains.
Yeah.
How did it all come to fruition? What happened with the whole ordeal with you not staying in the band? And I guess maybe just tell the story.
Sure. Well, I was in high school, and I believe I was like at the beginning of my senior year. I was 17 years old. And I don't even remember exactly how Lane and James Bergstrom, the drummer, got a hold of or knew about me. I think it was just somebody told them this sounds very funny, but it's like when, he's got really cool hair, and he looks the part. And he plays guitar. I heard he's pretty good, but I never heard him play. And so these guys came down, and I met them, and they were kind of fussy like old women with my hair, and going like, "Oh, we could do this with it. We could do this with it," and blah blah blah. And they're like, "Yeah, you're in the band." So at that time, it was me, Lane, James Bergstrom on drums, and Jim Shepard on bass, who was the bass player for Sanctuary and then Nevermore. And honestly, he left before ever playing a show with us to go back to playing with Sanctuary, which coincidentally is my cousin's band.
Oh.
And yeah, Sean Blosel, and then his cousin is Lenny Rutledge. And anyways, this shows you how nepotistic bands are in Seattle and stuff like that. But anyways, then we got there was a kind of like a revolving door of bass players, and that ultimately ended up being Johnny Bacolis was the longest and most substantial one. He used to play guitar in the band back when they were like 15, and it was called Sleaze. It was called Sleaze when I got into it, spelled Sleze, which makes me roll my eyes to this day. But anyways, we dropped that name and came up with the name Alice in Chains, but with an N in the middle instead of in. And long story short, when they ended up, I'll keep it kind of short here. James and I left to do another band. It was a band called The Society, and the band didn't necessarily break up as much as it just sort of like drifted apart in ways. And some of this had to do, and I put this in David DeSola's book, it did have a bit to do with Lane's drug use, and we had a group conversation with him that was very emotional for all concerned, but it wasn't something that ultimately I don't think he was ever going to stop. So James and I saw the writing on the wall, and we kind of moved on. I was still hanging out with Lane a lot then, and I'm the one that introduced Jerry to him.
Oh, cool.
I had Jerry come down and stay at my place during that time, my parents' house actually at that time, and introduced him to Lane, which he'll has often told this story more recently too. They ended up putting a band together. It was called Diamond Lie at first, and then Lane called James and me and said, "Hey, we were thinking about changing the name to Alice in Chains. What do you think? Would you guys be like really pissed at me for doing that?" And we're like, at first, James and I are talking about it because we're playing in a band and he's going like, "That fucker." And, and then it was like, well, he's our friend. We're not using it. Why not? Whatever. Let's just support him. So we did. And then we were there at that Skate King show, which I think was the first, I don't know if it's the very first one where they did with the new name. I think it was. I'm pretty sure because I think it revolved around that phone call. And they became Alice in Chains. And they were using our old logo and all that kind of stuff. They altered it to say In Chains. And they got rid of that after some period of time. And Lane and I were together all the time. We went to if we didn't go to the parties together, we created the parties at other people's houses.
That's awesome.
And it was kind of crazy that, we caused problems for people, but we always had a party to go to, and they were always raging.
Oh, so
awesome.
Cool. All right. So last question. You talked about, the Seattle sound. You don't like to use the term grunge. We understand that. You did, you said a lot of punks, but you also referred to UFO, other classic rock bands. If you were to give the Seattle sound, it was definitely more punk than metal, or it was definitely more metal than punk. How would you, I guess, give it would you say it was punks going a little metal, or was it little metalheads going a little punk? How would you classify it?
I would typify it with probably 3 parts. One of them is not as tangible as the other two. It was rock mixed with punk, and I think in very equal measures. I don't think you can listen to Nirvana and say this is straight up punk. It just isn't. And you certainly can't listen to Soundgarden and say that they don't have a very substantial rock aspect to what they did. But there was more of like an attitude and an approach to the way that we all viewed life at that coming of age time that had a healthy amount of apathy and nihilism. And that's more of the intangible thing. But then a very artistic way of trying to just, or not even trying, of really sounding different, because we didn't want to be those other bands. Like, Michael Schenker, we certainly didn't want that in My Sister's Machine. And that wasn't the case with anybody else that was doing it. But they brought their own degree of, I don't want to call it negativity, but it is unfortunately a kind of apathy and nihilism that was so poetic that it tied a lot of those things together. But I think that for some bands it was like a big punk thing, and a lot of them just straight out did it. Mudhoney's a great example of that. But the big ones that came out were not in that vein. I mean, Pearl Jam is not a punk band. I mean, even though there's a feel and a vibe there, Soundgarden's not a punk band, even though there's certainly roots in it. Alice has more to borrow from hard rock than anything else. And My Sister's Machine, not to put myself in the same league as those guys, even though they're my friends, is more heavy and faster than those other ones.
Yeah.
Probably from a guitar player that did way too much coke.
Well, as we conclude here, is there anything that we didn't cover tonight that you would like to promote or plug?
Man, I have such a hard time remembering everything until people ask questions, and then it brings up stories, which is a great way to do it. So I just trust that the conversation worked out well. And, I do realize this about what happened in Seattle, and I did realize it when I was in it, even though I don't think I could articulate it the same way I might with, some years gone past and maturity. And that is much like what happened probably in the 60s, right around 67 up through 70 or so. Seattle was very much that type of a thing that happened culturally that you just don't find very often. And I do think the world is primed for something to happen out there that would be like that now. God knows that we need it more than we did even coming out of the 80s. Now, the music is so vapid. It is so lifeless in so many ways. And there are wonderful exceptions that I could point out, but I won't. But yeah, that's just, I hope more of that comes out. I'm always trying to write for that same reason and try to be the me that I am now rather than where I was in the 90s. And I just keep putting out music. It's what drives me. It's what I want to hear in other people, something authentic.
Oh, wow. So cool.
Yeah, it's exciting. I listened to Death Blossom today, and I just discovered it and can't wait to go out and try to find it. So I'm
what
just
did you think?
Oh, I loved it. It's awesome.
Well, as we kind of conclude here, this is how it's going to work out. We have about 3 weeks worth of episodes to release before yours. So probably about 3.5 weeks we'll release this episode. And obviously you'll be the first one to receive it after Jeff, the editing wizard over here, gets it all edited for us.
I would love to be able to promote this. And I'm assuming that you're going to share with me whatever promotional materials you've got, but I'll blast it on all my social. Both of you guys, thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity. I'm honored that you guys would care about anything that I've done, and I just love to be able to have some promo so people will listen.
Absolutely, man.
And we're excited to hear more.
Yeah, so we'll have that we'll have that teaser little promo out here in the next few hours, and then I'll make sure I can even save it and send it to you too as well. So we'll just get it all figured out. Okay, man.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
Hey, man.
I'm good.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Take
All
care.
right, we'll talk to you guys later.
All right, good night.
Bye-bye.
Everybody hides at home inside their nest of snakes. Everybody grinds the stone and makes their own mistakes. Hide in the headlights, fight the grip of fear. You can make your dreams come true, but you just can't do it here. Hey! Everybody eyes the gun and screams inside their head. Everybody bites their tongue and pays their bills instead. Hide in the spotlights, fight the grip of death. You can have the air you need, but you best not take one breath. Hey! Roll the dice. Take your chances. Everybody knows the game is fixed, there is no prize. Everybody pulls the plug and says their last goodbyes. Move to the sunshine, fight the grip of nights. If they ever take from you, then you plug out.